Police drag black woman from first class. She demands their badge numbers as airline attorney. A swirl of chatter filled the air at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, where travelers hurried between gates, exhausted children cried for rest, and overhead announcements blared about flight delays. At Gate A23, an unexpected commotion threatened to overshadow the everyday bustle. A first-class passenger, a respected attorney, found herself surrounded by uniformed officers. Eyes from every angle fixated on the unfolding scene, some in shock, some in curiosity, many in dawning outrage. Tension thickened with each passing second as the woman refused to leave her seat. No one had any idea how ugly, tangled, and far-reaching this encounter was about to become. Onyx Williams's heart pounded against her rib cage as she settled into a seat in the first-class cabin of Delta Flight 724, bound for San Francisco. She was exhausted from a week of high-stakes legal negotiations on behalf of a major airline, ironically, the very same one she was now flying on. As a corporate defense attorney, Onyx took pride in her meticulous work ethic and the fact that she rarely, if ever, had to be anywhere she wasn't invited. Nobody forced Onyx Williams into a room, a conference call, or even a conversation. That's why she cherished these moments in first class, a place where she could momentarily escape the demands of her profession, sip a refreshing beverage, and enjoy a little personal space. Her seat was near the front, with a wide window that gave an unobstructed view of the shimmering runway. The sun kissed the tarmac outside, causing heat waves to ripple across the concrete. It was a hot summer day in Atlanta, and Onyx was looking forward to cooler weather on the West Coast. The flight attendant, a kindly older woman named Miriam, offered her a complimentary glass of champagne before takeoff. Onyx smiled, thanked her, and took a gentle sip. Little did she know that this moment of tranquility would soon be shattered. At first, everything seemed routine: overhead bins closing, announcements about stowing carry-on luggage, and the cheery final boarding call for any stragglers. Onyx powered off her phone per standard procedure. She was more than ready for a nap. Then came the first sign that something was off. A junior flight attendant hurried down the aisle, whispering to a colleague in hushed but urgent tones. Onyx caught only fragments: seat, mismatch, confirmation, possible error. The older flight attendant, Miriam, peered over her shoulder toward Onyx, then quickly diverted her gaze. Onyx noticed but brushed it off. She'd traveled first class on countless occasions. If there was a glitch in the booking system, she was sure it'd get cleared up quickly. However, the sense of unease grew when a gate agent suddenly entered the cabin. She wore a name tag that read Tessa, and her face was pinched in obvious concern. Tessa quietly approached Onyx's row, her eyes scanning the seat number. Onyx felt the heavy weight of that gaze and realized that, whatever was going on, it was about her. Tessa leaned in, her voice trembling slightly. "Miss Williams, is it?" she asked, checking her handheld device. "I'm sorry, but there seems to be a discrepancy with your ticket. Could I please see your boarding pass again?" Onyx, always cordial, smiled as she handed over her pass. "I checked in at the kiosk. Everything was fine. Is there a problem?" Tessa studied the pass, typed something into her device, and frowned. "I'm not quite sure yet. It may just be a system glitch. Let me double-check." She left, only to return 2 minutes later. This time, she was accompanied by another agent, an older man with a resolute expression. Onyx overheard their whispered conversation. "It's flagged as fraudulent," the man said quietly. "We might have to remove her." Onyx's eyes widened. Fraudulent? That was absurd. The ticket was legitimately purchased and issued by the airline's own corporate travel department, for which Onyx also occasionally consulted. She was the last person on Earth who would ever use a fraudulent ticket. Before Onyx could speak, the older agent approached. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to gather your belongings and come with us. Your ticket has been flagged, and we need to discuss this with airport authorities." A wave of shocked indignation washed over Onyx. She had encountered difficulties in her life, particularly as a black woman in a high-profile legal role, but an accusation of using a fraudulent ticket was new territory. A flicker of defiance lit in her chest, one that fueled her entire legal career. She squared her shoulders. "I'm not going anywhere until someone gives me a proper explanation," she replied, her voice calm yet unyielding. "I am an attorney for this airline, and I know how the system works. If there's a glitch, we can resolve it, but I am not leaving my seat without cause." Other first-class passengers, mostly business travelers and a sprinkling of vacationers, shifted uncomfortably. One or two craned their necks to catch a better glimpse, uncertain whether to intervene or remain silent. Nobody wants to get involved in a confrontation at an airport, especially these days. The older agent bristled. We're not asking. We're telling you that you must step off this plane." Miriam, the flight attendant who had served Onyx, took a step forward. Onyx noticed that Miriam's expression reflected concern, even sympathy. But rules are rules, and flight crews often have to enforce them without question. Onyx clenched her jaw. "If you believe my ticket is fraudulent, then by all means, involve your supervisor. In fact, involve the head of Delta's legal department. I can wait." The tension in the cabin escalated further. People started pulling out their phones, capturing the exchange. Onyx was acutely aware of how these incidents can go viral, and the last thing she wanted was an ugly public spectacle. But she also couldn't let an unfounded accusation stand. As an attorney, she understood the importance of evidence, proper procedure, and the chain of command. She knew her rights as both a passenger and as counsel for the airline. She had no intention of meekly handing over the seat she rightfully occupied. Miriam tried to de-escalate. "Miss Williams, maybe we can handle this quietly at the gate and reboard you once everything is straightened out. We're just a little behind schedule, and we need to close the cabin doors soon." Onyx sighed, measuring her words carefully. "I am absolutely willing to cooperate. However, I do not accept that you can simply tell me fraudulent ticket and expect me to disembark without concrete information. With all due respect, Miriam, I know the guidelines. If you're going to make a serious accusation, have the proof. Show me the system error. Otherwise, let me remain here peacefully." By now, a handful of travelers were openly recording video, some sending updates to social media. Whispers spread like wildfire. Onyx glanced around and saw faces etched with curiosity and discomfort. Her attention was pulled back when the older agent, clearly frustrated, stepped aside and spoke quickly into his walkie-talkie. It took no more than 3 minutes before 2 uniformed airport police officers strode onto the plane, their expressions serious. Onyx felt a shiver roll down her spine. She'd handled corporate lawsuits against airport authorities in the past, but never found herself on the receiving end of potential police aggression. Her posture stiffened. She placed her laptop bag under the seat in front of her, not wanting it out of her sight. "Ma'am," began one of the officers, tall and broad-shouldered. "I'm Officer Grant." "This is Officer Timmons. We have been informed that there is an issue with your ticket and that you're refusing to deplane. Is that accurate?" Onyx took a moment to measure her response. "Officers, my name is Onyx Williams. The first, am a licensed attorney, and I also represent Delta in certain legal matters. My ticket was purchased through official channels. There is no possible way it is fraudulent. If there is a discrepancy in the system, I am happy to cooperate. But I will not voluntarily leave this seat until someone shows me legitimate cause, And that cause must be more than vague references to a flagged ticket. Officer Grant pressed his lips together. Ma'am, you understand we can't allow the plane to depart until this is resolved, correct? The airline staff has requested you disembark. If you do not comply, we are authorized to remove you by force if necessary. Onyx's heart hammered, but her composure never wavered. Then let me speak with a higher authority. Or let's wait until the airline's legal department weighs in. This is an extraordinary measure to take against a paying passenger, particularly one who works with the airline. Check your internal system under the corporate counsel list. You'll see my name. One of the gate agents had left, presumably to contact a supervisor or confirm Onyx's claim. Meanwhile, tension in the first-class cabin felt like it could be cut with a blade. The officers exchanged a look. Onyx was aware that, in the current climate, any sign of resistance could be misconstrued as threatening behavior. She didn't move, her hands resting calmly on her lap. People behind her were murmuring, "This is crazy. Just show her the system glitch. Why are they escalating this?" A few supportive voices began to speak up. "Hey, she's done nothing wrong." Yet Onyx also sensed the undercurrent of fear. Nobody wanted to get singled out by authorities. Finally, the older agent marched back in with a printout. He looked at Onyx with a strange mixture of triumph and discomfort. "MAM, the system says the seat was claimed through unauthorized means. We cannot verify the purchase. You need to step off, or we will rebook you on a later flight once this is sorted out." "Unauthorized means?" Onyx repeated in disbelief. "That doesn't even make sense. My corporate travel manager booked this flight. This is a huge misunderstanding." But Onyx's protestations seemed to fall on deaf ears. The officers, now visibly impatient, stepped closer. She felt cornered. From the corner of her eye, she noticed that Miriam appeared genuinely distressed by the situation, standing at the front of the cabin with her hands clasped, as if silently willing them to find a peaceful resolution. "Ma'am," Officer Grant said firmly, "you have one last chance to comply voluntarily." Onyx's chest tightened. Everything about this screamed injustice. Yet she saw the set of his jaw, the unwavering stance. These men were prepared to do their job. She'd seen it happen too many times to count black travelers singled out for tiny infractions, claims of fraudulent tickets or other nonsense that somehow never happened to her non-black colleagues. Now it was happening to her, under the nose of an airline she represented. The irony was bitter and painful. She inhaled slowly, preparing to stand to her feet, if only to avoid physical harm. Yet even as she reached for her bag, Officer Timmons grabbed her arm, presumably to speed things along. That was the moment Onyx realized that reason might not prevail here. She jerked back reflexively. "Don't touch me unless I'm under arrest," she warned, her tone sharp. "And if I am under arrest, read me my rights. Otherwise, keep your hands off me." This seemed to enrage Timmons. "You're resisting," he spat. "That's a violation. We can remove you by any force necessary." "I'm not resisting," Onyx said tersely, "but I have every right to refuse physical contact if I'm not being charged." At that point, everything happened quickly. Timmons grabbed Onyx's arm again more forcefully. She tried to wrench free, protesting that she would walk off the plane on her own volition if they only gave her a moment. But the officer persisted, yanking her into the aisle. Her chest collided with the edge of the seat, causing her to gasp. She felt a spike of anger. This was blatant misconduct. She had done nothing to provoke such violence. Chaos erupted in the cabin, a flurry of phones aimed at the scuffle. Voices shouted, "Stop! Hey, that's not right!" But Onyx barely heard them as Timmons and Grant each took an arm. She stumbled over her laptop bag and dropped to one knee, scraping it painfully against the metal seat bracket. "Get up!" Timmons barked. Onyx's vision swam as she tried to regain her footing. She couldn't believe this was happening. A professional black woman in a first-class seat she'd rightfully obtained, now being manhandled like a criminal. She felt a surge of righteous fury. Once they were in the aisle, Onyx glimpsed Miriam's pale face, tears in the corners of the older flight attendant's eyes. Onyx tried to speak, but the anger and adrenaline in her system made it nearly impossible to form words. Roughly, the officers dragged her toward the exit. By now, Onyx was in full survival mode. Yet her training as an attorney guided her: document, record, gather evidence. She managed to free one arm just enough to grab her phone from her jacket pocket, pressing record even as Timmons tried to yank it away. "I'm Onyx Williams," she spoke into the phone's microphone, her voice shaking. "I am being forcibly removed from Delta Flight 724. My ticket is valid. I asked for proof of any fraud claim, and they refused. These are the officers." She twisted her head to see their name badges. Officer Grant and Officer Timmons. Badge numbers. She tried to read them off, but Timmons shoved her phone, nearly knocking it out of her hand. She still caught the partial badge number on camera. In the jetway, Onyx's focus snapped to the gate area, where startled passengers looked on. She saw a Delta supervisor hurrying toward them, but the officers ignored him, continuing to march Onyx forward. They were hurting her arms, gripping too tightly. Something inside Onyx snapped. She had never been so publicly humiliated. All the respect she'd earned, the devotion to her work, the late nights, the advanced degrees, it seemed meaningless to these men. They saw only a black woman who dared to question their authority. "Release me!" Onyx shouted. "I can walk on my own," but her pleas fell on deaf ears. The officers pushed her into a nearby seating area by gate A20, three pressing her down into a chair. The older agent from earlier stood a few steps away, shifting uncomfortably. Onyx pinned him with a glare. "I want your name too," she demanded, "and Tessa's. Everyone involved in this. You have no right to do this to me." She was breathing hard, her blouse damp with sweat, her arms throbbing with pain where the officers had dug in their fingers. Passers-by stared. Some took videos on their phones. Onyx felt her cheeks burn with a mixture of anger and embarrassment, but she refused to cower. Officer Grant let out a heavy breath. "You're out of the aircraft now. That's all we needed. If you keep making a scene, we'll cuff you and take you to holding. Do you understand?" Onyx stared at him, her fury nearly choking her ability to speak. She forced herself to remain calm. She knew exactly how quickly these situations could escalate. "You both will regret this," she said, with the quiet intensity of someone who knows the law better than those enforcing it. "I promise you." The supervisor who had rushed over earlier finally intervened. He was short, balding, wearing a Delta uniform with a name tag reading Norman. He looked flustered, as though he'd run all the way from somewhere else in the terminal. "Officers, let's take a moment, please," Norman said, stepping between Onyx and the police. "What's going on here?" Both officers stared him down but stepped back slightly. Onyx stood shakily, adjusting her disheveled clothes, and tried to catch her breath. She recounted the situation as best she could through her adrenaline, explaining that she was Onyx Williams, a practicing attorney, that she had a valid ticket, and the airline staff insisted it was fraudulent without any tangible proof. Norman's face paled as he listened, particularly when Onyx mentioned she was connected to Delta's legal department. The older agent coughed nervously, as if to divert attention. "We have a printout that says her ticket was flagged," he mumbled, waving the paper. Norman took the paper, looked it over, and frowned. "This must be a mistake. Miss Williams is indeed in our system, flagged as a corporate counsel. Why wasn't this verified before the police were called?" His tone was exasperated. The agent squirmed. Onyx found a shred of satisfaction at Norman's reaction. She wasn't yet appeased. And what about these officers who saw fit to drag me off the plane? She demanded, fighting back tears of anger. This is unacceptable. Norman's distress deepened. Officers, I think we can resolve this. If Miss Williams's ticket is legitimate, there's no reason for her to be removed from the flight. We'll get a new boarding pass printed. Let's calm down, please. Timmons crossed his arms. We did what we were asked to do. Airline staff told us she was refusing to deplane. That was enough for us to intervene. Onyx let out a bitter laugh. You didn't intervene. You assaulted me. You forcibly dragged me off without verifying the situation. She turned to Norman, her eyes ablaze. I want the names of every staff member involved in this fiasco. I'm calling the airline's chief counsel immediately. You're all going to face repercussions for how I was treated. Norman tried to placate her. Miss Williams, the first to apologize on behalf of Delta. Let's get you rebooked, or put you back on your original flight if it hasn't departed. Let's see if that's still an option. He glanced at his watch nervously. Onyx's chest tightened with renewed outrage. You think I'm going to go quietly back into a first-class seat, maybe with a half-hearted apology? Your staff humiliated me in front of other passengers. These officers used physical force. I'll cooperate with your corporate office, but this is far from resolved. The crowd that had formed was now dispersing, some people shaking their heads, others throwing Onyx sympathetic looks. A few even patted her shoulder or whispered words of support. Meanwhile, Onyx was trembling part from anger, part from the shock of what had just transpired. She was a seasoned professional, used to intense legal battles and harsh negotiations, but never had she experienced a direct, physical confrontation like this. Norman cleared his throat. If you'll follow me, Miss Williams, we'll go to a quieter area and sort out all the details. Officers, that should do it. We won't need your further assistance. Without another word, Onyx turned and walked beside Norman, ignoring the police. Her arms ached, and she was certain there would be bruises. She was also aware that adrenaline was still pumping through her veins, making her feel edgy and hyper-alert. She tried to focus on the next step, contacting the airline's in-house counsel, documenting every detail, and making sure she had enough evidence to hold these individuals accountable. They reached a small lounge reserved for airline employees. Norman gestured for Onyx to sit. She did so stiffly, rummaging through her bag for her phone. To her relief, she found it still recording. She stopped the recording and saved the file, then immediately dialed a number from memory. The phone rang twice before a woman answered, her tone brisk. This is Harriet speaking. Harriet? It's Onyx, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. I've just been physically removed from a Delta flight after being accused of having a fraudulent ticket. I need immediate assistance. I'm at gate at 23 in Hartsfield-Jackson. Could you alert the appropriate people? Harriet's shock was palpable. Wait, what did you say? Are you all right? You were removed physically? Onyx steadied herself. Yes, physically. I have bruises. Airport police officers forcibly dragged me out of first class. She gave Harriet a quick summary of events. Harriet, as the senior counsel within Delta's legal department, was someone Onyx trusted implicitly. She knew Harriet would be outraged, and Onyx could hear it in her friend's tone. Harriet told Onyx to stay put, that she would call the internal crisis management team and escalate the matter to the highest levels. Norman, who had overheard parts of Onyx's conversation, looked increasingly nervous. Once Onyx ended the call, he offered her water, which she accepted only to wet her parched throat. She stared at him calmly. Let me guess you're new to this position? He nodded sheepishly. Promoted to supervisor 6 months ago. I don't know how this happened. The system flagged your ticket, but typically we do more thorough checks before calling airport police. Onyx's anger flared again. Yes, that's what competent staff would do. Instead, your gate agents approached me like I was a criminal, refused to show me evidence, and then the police escalated to physical force. This is not a small oversight, Norman. She saw the flush creeping up his neck. I know. I'm so sorry. I swear I didn't instruct them to use force. They just said we had a passenger refusing to deplane with a fraudulent ticket. Usually that means we have to follow protocol, but this got out of hand. Onyx exhaled, feeling the full weight of the ordeal. It certainly did. Let me be very clear, I'm not letting this go. And I have every right to hold the individuals responsible for assault. Norman opened his mouth to respond, but just then Harriet arrived, looking flushed and furious. She wore a sharp pantsuit and carried a leather briefcase. Her short salt and pepper curls framed a face that mixed compassion and professional steel. Without waiting, Harriet came over and hugged Onyx. You poor thing, are you okay? What is going on here? Onyx nodded, though she felt close to tears for the first time. I'm physically fine, just bruised and extremely upset. I want badge numbers. I want staff IDs. I want answers. Then let's get them, Harriet said, turning to Norman. I want everyone involved in the same room, right now. Her voice could slice through granite. Norman gulped. Ma'am, the officers might have other calls to respond to, but then you had better call the airport police desk and ensure they return, Harriet snapped. We need an incident report, and Onyx has every right to request it. Also, the gate agents Tessa and the older gentleman. Bring them too. Norman visibly flinched but nodded. He made a few phone calls, stammering into his walkie-talkie. Meanwhile, Harriet guided Onyx into a private briefing room, one typically used by flight crews. Tell me everything in detail, Harriet demanded. Onyx laid it all out, from the moment Tessa questioned her about the ticket to the brutal takedown in the aisle. Harriet took copious notes. Her face darkened at the mention of Onyx's phone being shoved away when she tried to record. That's not just a procedural violation, Harriet muttered. They could face serious legal repercussions. We'll need the security footage from the gate area, if available, and all passenger cell phone videos. They were definitely recording, Onyx confirmed. Plenty of people in first class had their phones out. Harriet shook her head in disbelief. We're lucky if any of them come forward to share footage. But given the way these things tend to spread on social media, we might see it surface anyway. Norman returned to say that the officers had been contacted. The older agent had also been summoned, while Tessa would arrive soon. Harriet nodded curtly and motioned for Onyx to remain seated, her posture protective. Onyx appreciated the unwavering support. She was determined to push for accountability, but Harriet's presence gave her the backup she needed. Onyx felt the tears well up again. She hadn't asked for any of this. She only wanted to go home, maybe enjoy a glass of wine, get some rest, and start fresh in San Francisco. But that normalcy had been ripped away by prejudice and incompetence. Within minutes, the small briefing room was crowded. Officer Grant walked in first, followed by Officer Timmons, who scowled upon seeing Onyx and Harriet. Tessa came in, looking nervous as she clutched a tablet. The older agent was there too, standing slightly behind Tessa as though he could hide in her shadow. Norman hovered off to the side, aware that Harriet outranked him in every meaningful way. Harriet was all business. Officers, I'm Harriet Irving, senior counsel at Delta. We have a serious situation on our hands. My colleague, Onyx Williams, was forcibly removed from a Delta flight under suspicion of a fraudulent ticket. Our system has since confirmed that Miss Williams's ticket was legitimate and that she is, in fact, authorized counsel for the airline. We need to understand why the police were called and, more importantly, why they resorted to force without proper verification. Timmons's jaw worked. We were told she was refusing to deplane. That's grounds for removal if airline staff claims it's necessary. She resisted, so we used minimal force to ensure safety. Onyx felt her temper flare. Minimal force? You bruised my arms and nearly knocked me off my feet. Harriet held up a hand to steady Onyx. Officer Timmons, we'll need your badge number, as well as Officer Grant's. Furthermore, Miss Williams states that she attempted to record the incident and that you pushed her phone away. Is that correct? Grant glanced at Timmons, then back at Harriet. We had to secure the area. Phones can be used, but when a passenger is resisting, we have to. Resisting, Onyx echoed. I only refused to leave because I wanted proof of the fraudulent claim. That's not resisting. I said I would walk. You grabbed me anyway. Harriet jotted something on her notepad. Officers, I advise you that Miss Williams is well within her rights to file a complaint and pursue legal action for excessive force. As for you two, she turned to the older gate agent. And Tessa, on what basis did you call the police without further verification? Did you even contact a supervisor first? Tessa twisted her hands. We tried to verify the ticket, but the system flagged it. The older agent Frank said that we had no time to investigate because the flight needed to depart. He insisted we call the police to remove her before we delayed departure. Frank, the older agent, spoke up defensively. That's standard procedure if a passenger doesn't comply. The system flag was clear. We didn't have time to debate it. Did you speak with Miss Williams at length? Harriet asked. Frank shrugged. She refused to get off. Harriet looked ready to explode. She's an attorney for this airline. If she says there's a mistake, you verify. You don't just call the police. The cost of a flight delay is nothing compared to the liability we now face for how this was handled. Her voice rose in indignation. This is not just a question of inconvenience. It's a question of possible racial profiling. Do you understand the gravity of that accusation? At that, Onyx felt the precarious swirl of emotions rise again. That was the unspoken undercurrent. Would a similarly dressed, similarly positioned white woman in first class have faced the same blatant suspicion? The same immediate jump to fraudulent ticket and harsh treatment? She doubted it. She could see it in the eyes of Tessa and Frank, an unspoken defense mechanism that said, "No, we're not racist. We're just doing our jobs." But Onyx had seen that line trotted out too many times. Frank's face reddened. We were not profiling. We were following the system's lead. It said the ticket was stolen or fraudulent. That's not on us. Harriet's lip curled. And you didn't try to check with corporate travel or the legal department. A single phone call could have cleared this up in 5 minutes. Frank swallowed. We didn't have that contact info on hand. Onyx shook her head in disbelief. I offered to wait until you reached someone in higher authority, but you chose to escalate. Timmons jumped in. Look, we're the police. We respond to requests from airline staff. We can't read your mind about being an attorney. If they say you're refusing to leave, we have to remove you. That's how it works. So you used force on a non-threatening passenger? That's how it works? Onyx retorted, her tone laced with scorn. A tense silence followed. Harriet finally spoke in a measured voice. Let's be clear. Onyx has grounds for a lawsuit. We need to see if this can be resolved in some fashion that satisfies her claims. Officers, the first need your badge numbers. Tessa and Frank, I need your employee IDs. Norman, you will supply me with copies of the flight manifest and any internal notes referencing Miss Williams's seat assignment. Also, I want the security footage from the gate area. Is that understood? Everyone nodded, subdued. Harriet continued. Now, Onyx, let me speak directly with you. What is your immediate request here? Onyx inhaled, considering. I want to get on the next flight to San Francisco, but that's hardly the main issue. I need a formal written apology. I need Delta to address the systemic flaw that allowed my ticket to be flagged. I want an investigation into Tessa and Frank's actions, as well as disciplinary measures for how this was handled. And regarding the officers, I'm inclined to press charges for excessive use of force." Timmons let out a frustrated sigh, but Harriet gave him a cold look that silenced him. She turned back to Onyx. "We'll ensure Delta provides every bit of restitution and accountability possible, Onyx. As for the police aspect, that's under airport jurisdiction, and you're fully entitled to file a formal complaint." Onyx nodded. Her anger was no longer white-hot, but simmering, controlled. She was a lawyer, after all. She knew how to channel this into something concrete. "Good," she said quietly. "I intend to hold everyone involved responsible." Harriet placed a reassuring hand on Onyx's shoulder. "Then let's get started. We'll get you medical attention if you need it for those bruises, and we'll handle rebooking you. The rest we'll manage through official channels." With that, Onyx stood. Tessa and Frank offered to escort her to the lounge to rebook, but Onyx refused. She wanted no further contact with them. Norman, looking chastened, offered to do it instead. The police officers left without another word, though Timmons cast Onyx a final glare that seemed to convey bitterness at being called out. Onyx's heart still pounded. She doubted she would ever forget the feeling of being dragged through the aisle by force. No matter how much restitution or apology came her way, the memory would linger. Over the next several hours, Onyx's life changed in ways she couldn't have predicted. The video from inside the cabin began circulating on social media before she even finished rebooking her flight. Strangers posted outraged comments, calling for boycotts and accountability. Hashtags began to trend, echoing Onyx's experience with calls for justice. Delta's social media team scrambled to contain the fallout. Onyx's phone blew up with messages from friends, colleagues, even old acquaintances who recognized her face in the viral footage. It was overwhelming, but also validating, to see how many people empathized with her plight. Harriet was busy coordinating from behind the scenes, contacting public relations, crisis management, and executive leadership. Onyx overheard Harriet telling someone, "This is a PR nightmare, especially given Onyx's role as an attorney for our company. We need immediate, transparent communication, or it will get worse." The flight Onyx had been dragged off eventually took off without her. She was booked on a later flight in an upgraded suite, though Onyx took no comfort in that. The bruise on her knee made walking painful. Her arms ached. Worst of all, she felt rattled to her core by how quickly the situation spiraled out of control. She'd always known that traveling as a black professional could come with scrutiny, but she had never expected this. As she sat in the airport lounge, Onyx realized that the next steps would test every ounce of her legal expertise and emotional resilience. She was about to take on the very airline that employed her, even if Harriet was on her side. There would be internal politics, attempts to minimize or shift blame, and complexities involving the airport police. But Onyx was not one to back down. What she didn't anticipate were the hidden layers of conspiracy soon to emerge, an orchestrated attempt by a rival legal faction within Delta trying to sabotage Onyx's standing. Nor did she expect the deeper personal betrayals or the surprising allies who would come to her aid. She had only scratched the surface of the forces arrayed against her. This wasn't just about one flight or one humiliating incident. It was about power, corporate maneuvering, and the raw nerve of racial injustice that cut through every layer of society. 2 days after the incident, Onyx found herself in a high-rise boardroom at Delta's corporate headquarters in Atlanta. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline, while executive-level staff filed in for an emergency meeting. Many recognized Onyx from past collaborations. Some offered terse nods of acknowledgement or looks of poorly concealed alarm. Harriet had insisted Onyx be there in person to present her case. Delta's CEO, Malcolm Rivera, presided over the meeting. He was a tall, imposing figure with wavy silver hair and a reserved demeanor. Williams, he began, folding his hands on the polished oak table, first, allow me to personally apologize for the ordeal you experienced. I want you to know that Delta has launched a full investigation into the matter. We take allegations of racial profiling and excessive force extremely seriously. Onyx's gaze flickered around the room. She recognized some of the faces: Dan Harlow, head of human resources, Clara Cho, vice president of customer relations, and a few other department heads. They all looked on edge. Their entire day's agenda had likely been derailed by Onyx's case, along with the firestorm on social media. She could smell the corporate panic. "Thank you," Onyx replied carefully. "I appreciate the apology, but words are only the beginning. I have demands that pertain not just to my personal compensation or justice, but to systemic changes within the airline to prevent such incidents." A flicker of something crossed Malcolm Rivera's face: respect, perhaps, or apprehension. "Understood," he said. "We are prepared to hear your recommendations." Onyx inhaled deeply, casting a glance at Harriet, who offered a small, encouraging nod. Number 1. Thorough retraining of gate agents on conflict resolution, specifically emphasizing de-escalation and verification processes before contacting law enforcement. Number 2. An overhaul of the software that flags tickets as fraudulent, ensuring there are built-in protocols that require managerial approval before passengers are confronted. Number 3. A formal, public apology from Delta, acknowledging the role bias might have played. Even if unintended, she felt the tension ratchet up in the room. Public apologies admitting potential bias were a public relations minefield, but Onyx pressed on. And number 4, a significant monetary settlement for the emotional distress, physical harm, and reputational damage I've suffered. Although I represent Delta in some matters, that does not exclude me from seeking damages as a private citizen who was wronged. At the word damages, Onyx saw Clara Cho purse her lips. Dan Harlow scribbled something on a notepad. Harriet remained stoic, her posture radiating fierce support. Malcolm Rivera cleared his throat. "We will certainly review each of these points in detail." A sudden interruption came from a man Onyx had scarcely noticed before: James Lockwood, a middle-aged attorney from the airline's internal counsel team. Onyx never worked closely with him, but she knew him by reputation: cold, calculating, fiercely competitive in internal power struggles. He regarded Onyx with thinly veiled antagonism. "Let's not forget, Miss Williams, that you are also on retainer for Delta. Wouldn't that be considered a conflict of interest if you simultaneously pursue damages from the company you represent?" Onyx's spine stiffened. "I'm capable of structuring a legal conflict waiver, or, if necessary, I'll step down from my role with Delta to pursue my civil rights. I refuse to let that be a barrier to justice." Lockwood's lips curved in a slight sneer. "Of course. And about the issue of bias, are you suggesting that our employees acted with racist intent?" There it was, Onyx thought. The direct confrontation. "I'm suggesting that conscious or unconscious bias led them to disregard proper procedure and treat me as inherently suspicious. My seat in first class was presumed fraudulent. I'm not a mind reader, so I can't say for certain how much was malicious, but the result was racially discriminatory. That alone is enough to require remedy." Lockwood leaned back in his chair, tapping a pen against the table. "We might argue the system glitch alone caused the confusion, not your race." Harriet bristled. "Then why was Onyx not given the courtesy of a thorough check? Why were police called so quickly? Why was force used without even verifying her claim of being an attorney for this company? That goes beyond a simple system glitch, James." Lockwood's face hardened. Malcolm Rivera intervened, raising a hand for silence. We are not here to argue Onyx's experience. We are here to find a path forward that is fair and just for all parties. His voice carried the authority of a man used to having the final word. Now, Onyx, your demands are noted. We will set up a smaller committee myself, Harriet, Dan from HR, and Clara from Customer Relations to work through the specifics. James, if you wish to provide counsel, you may do so, but please keep your remarks productive. Lockwood nodded curtly, though his gaze flicked to Onyx with a glint of challenge. Onyx realized in that moment that Lockwood was probably the source of friction Harriet had vaguely referenced in the past. He was rumored to be pushing for more power in the legal department. Perhaps he saw Onyx's presence and her strong performance in certain high-stakes cases as a threat. The meeting adjourned with an air of cautious optimism from some and lingering hostility from others, primarily Lockwood. Onyx left the boardroom feeling shaky but resolute. This was only one battle in a war that had just begun. In the weeks that followed, Onyx was swamped with depositions, interviews, medical checkups for her bruises, and continuous pressure from the press. Harriet worked tirelessly to ensure Onyx's perspective was fairly represented. Media outlets clamored for Onyx's story, but she kept public statements limited, waiting for the official settlement negotiations to unfold. Behind the scenes, Harriet confided that she suspected sabotage. Lockwood has been linked to some shady backroom deals, she told Onyx late one evening as they pored over documents in Harriet's office. He was lobbying to outsource certain legal functions to a firm where he has connections. If your standing in the company is compromised, that might pave the way for him to push through his agenda. Onyx frowned, a sinking feeling in her gut. You mean to tell me that this system flag on my ticket might not have been an innocent glitch? Harriet shrugged. I can't say for sure, but it's a suspicion. This was so bizarrely targeted, and if you recall, you specifically said your corporate travel manager booked this ticket. That manager is new, right? Onyx nodded, her mind racing. Yes, her name is Kiara. She started barely a month ago. She's nice, though. I can't imagine she'd be part of some conspiracy. Harriet looked grim. Sometimes people get pressured. Or maybe Lockwood or someone in his circle found a way to manipulate the booking system. They could have inserted that flag. If there's any digital trail, we'll find it. Onyx sat back, reeling from the possibility. How deep did this run? She recalled small, seemingly insignificant moments, Lockwood's condescending remarks in a prior project meeting, the half-lies she'd heard about his tactics. Could he truly have stooped so low to orchestrate a scandal that left Onyx brutalized in an airplane aisle? She tightened her resolve. Then let's dig. If this was deliberate, I want every shred of evidence. Because that changes everything from corporate liability to criminal charges. Over the next few days, Onyx tapped her own network of experts and forensic analysts. Harriet did the same through official channels. They uncovered suspicious logs indicating Onyx's ticket had been modified after purchase, but before the check-in phase. The digital fingerprint pointed back to an administrative portal accessible only by select employees in corporate travel and, crucially, to a handful of authorized counsel, including James Lockwood. It was the first concrete thread of evidence linking Lockwood to Onyx's ordeal. Harriet confronted him privately, only to have him laugh it off. Conspiracy theories? Please. I have no reason to sabotage Onyx. Let's see if your so-called digital forensics hold up in court. One unexpected development, however, turned the tide. Kiara, Onyx's new corporate travel manager, approached Onyx confidentially with screenshots of her own. She had discovered that someone with higher access credentials had changed Onyx's seat assignment and manipulated the ticket's status. She had also received a cryptic email from an anonymous address instructing her not to mention any changes to Onyx or Harriet. Kiara had been afraid to come forward until she saw Onyx's unwavering determination and the outpouring of public support for her. "This is everything I found," Kiara said, handing Onyx a thumb drive. "I might lose my job for this, but I can't stay silent. You've been nothing but kind to me, and I'm appalled by what happened." Onyx felt a rush of gratitude and relief. She gently placed a hand on Kiara's arm. "Thank you. I promise I'll do everything in my power to protect you from retaliation." "You did the right thing." As Onyx and Harriet dove into Kiara's data, they found a partial IP match to Lockwood's known IP range in the corporate system. It wasn't conclusive proof he could claim his account was hacked, or that some subordinate acted on his behalf, but it was a major piece of the puzzle. Meanwhile, Onyx's personal lawsuit gained momentum. Public support soared each time a new aspect of the story came to light. Within Delta's top brass, some executives insisted on negotiating a private settlement, hoping to silence Onyx. But Onyx, driven by principle, insisted that any agreement include public transparency. Lockwood began to sweat under the scrutiny. Rumors swirled that he was trying to shift blame onto Tessa, Frank, and even Harriet. He whispered that Harriet was incompetent, Onyx was overreacting, and the airline would be better off with new legal leadership. But those tactics only fueled Onyx's resolve. She had never been one to cave to bullying. The final showdown took place in a hushed conference room, a setting similar to the first big meeting, but with fewer people, only the key players. Malcolm Rivera, Harriet, Onyx, Lockwood, and an HR legal advisor named Sheila. Tension crackled in the air. Malcolm began, "We have new information regarding the ticket flag. Miss Williams' forensic team and our internal, it confirmed that someone with your credentials, Mr. Lockwood, accessed the booking system the night before Miss Williams's flight. Can you explain this?" Lockwood feigned calm. "I access many corporate records. That's part of my job. If you're accusing me of fraud, show me proof that I personally changed Onyx's ticket." Onyx, feeling Harriet's supportive presence beside her, slid Kiara's screenshots across the table. "We have a record of your account logging into the system and making modifications to my itinerary. Care to explain the coincidence?" Lockwood's face tightened. "My account could have been used by anyone in my department. I have associates. They might have used my login to run checks." Harriet arched a brow. "Associates who would risk felony charges by framing Onyx. Hard to believe. Also, your password was changed just hours before Onyx's ticket was altered, locking out all your associates from using your credentials." Sheila from HR nodded solemnly. "It's pretty damning, James. Unless you can name someone who forced you to do this or used your credentials behind your back, we have to assume you orchestrated this." Lockwood's composure cracked. Sweat beaded on his forehead. "You can't prove malicious intent," he said, his voice wavering. Malcolm Rivera folded his arms. "You sabotaged a colleague, possibly to remove an obstacle to your own career ambitions. That sabotage led to a racially charged incident that cost our airline millions in negative publicity, not to mention the personal trauma inflicted on Miss Williams. Whether or not a prosecutor decides to press charges for identity fraud or conspiracy remains to be seen, but from a corporate standpoint, your actions are grounds for immediate termination." Lockwood's jaw dropped. He looked frantically at Onyx, Harriet, even Sheila, seeking any sign of reprieve. None came. Onyx felt a cool sense of vindication. This man's machinations had led to her public humiliation, physical harm, and emotional distress. Now, karma was exacting a swift and ironically dramatic form of justice. Malcolm pressed a button on the conference phone, calling in security. 2 guards entered, waiting to escort Lockwood out. He spluttered a final protest, but Harriet calmly placed a hand on a thick file of evidence. "We have everything we need, James. If you have any sense, you'll leave quietly and consult your own lawyer." Lockwood shot Onyx a hateful glare. You think you've won? This isn't over. Enough," Malcolm barked. Security escorted Lockwood away. Onyx sat motionless, her pulse hammering with relief and lingering anger. Harriet gently squeezed her hand under the table. They'd done it, exposed the real culprit behind the sabotage. Malcolm waited until Lockwood was gone, then turned to Onyx. "We will, of course, fully cooperate in any legal actions you wish to take against James Lockwood. For the airline's part, we are ready to finalize a settlement package, along with a public apology, if you're open to terms." Onyx felt a wave of fatigue, realizing how exhausting this entire ordeal had been. She nodded. "I'm open to terms that ensure real reform, accountability, and no cover-ups." Malcolm inclined his head. "Agreed. We'll negotiate in good faith." In the weeks that followed, Onyx and Harriet hammered out the details of the settlement. Delta issued a public statement acknowledging Onyx's experience, admitting that biases within protocol procedures had contributed, and promising a comprehensive review of their training and ticket flagging systems. Onyx received a substantial monetary settlement, part of which she donated to legal funds assisting victims of racial discrimination. She also maintained her role as an external counsel for Delta, albeit with stronger safeguards, ensuring no single gate agent or internal attorney could override her legitimate travel arrangements without multiple levels of verification. Tessa and Frank were disciplined and required to undergo intensive retraining. Some argued they should be fired, but Onyx believed in the possibility of growth if they truly confronted their biases and learned from the experience. Officer Grant and Officer Timmons faced internal reviews at the Airport Police Department, with Onyx filing a formal complaint about excessive force. The city's investigation was ongoing, but Onyx's personal depositions left little doubt that those officers would be scrutinized and likely reprimanded or suspended for their aggression. Lockwood, on the other hand, faced not only termination, but the threat of criminal charges. Onyx's lawsuit included him individually, citing malicious intent, defamation, and conspiracy. While the wheels of justice turned slowly, Onyx felt confident that a court would see through any lies he concocted. She took solace in the fact that his career at Delta was over, and that he would struggle to find a comparable position elsewhere. Sometimes, karma needed a strong push, but it had arrived, swift and uncompromising. On a personal level, Onyx found herself changed by the ordeal. She was no stranger to professional or racial challenges, but this incident peeled back layers of corporate politeness, exposing ugly truths. Yet she also experienced uplifting solidarity from passengers who shared their cell phone videos, from Kiara, who risked her job to reveal the truth, and from Harriet, who stood firmly by her side. A month after the dust settled, Onyx finally boarded a first-class Delta flight to San Francisco, this time with official approval and no tension at the gate. Miriam, the flight attendant, was there again, tears in her eyes as she greeted Onyx warmly. "I'm so sorry about last time," Miriam whispered. "I wish I could have done more." Onyx smiled gently. "It's all right. I know you tried to help." She settled into her seat, took a deep breath, and allowed herself to hope. Changes were happening. Perhaps, in time, the airline industry and society at large would learn to handle these situations with greater empathy and fairness. As the engines roared to life, Onyx gazed out the window at the runway. This time, she felt no fear, no dread, only a calm sense of resolve. She reflected on her new dedication to championing civil rights within her corporate practice. She had found her calling to ensure that no one else would ever have to endure the pain humiliation, and physical harm she had. In that sense, though the path had been traumatic, she felt a newfound clarity of purpose. Outside, the clouds parted as the plane ascended, bathing the cabin in golden light. Onyx closed her eyes, letting the hum of the aircraft guide her into a hopeful future. That is how one first-class seat turned into a fierce battle for dignity, justice, and real accountability. No matter how smooth the booking process might seem, or how polished the corporate facade may be, systemic flaws and the biases behind them can roar to life in an instant, changing someone's world forever. With persistence, determination, and the backing of good people willing to tell the truth, Onyx Williams stood her ground. She not only won proper restitution for the violation of her rights, but she also secured changes that will help protect countless others who step onto a plane expecting fair treatment. This story serves as both cautionary tale and inspiration, showing us the power of holding institutions accountable. If you found value in this dramatic journey, please like, share, and subscribe to stay updated on more stories that highlight resilience, courage, and the pursuit of justice.